I had a pretty creepy experience back in the early 2000s in Japan. I grew up as a biracial military brat and spent the better part of 2 decades growing up in Japan. Having spent years growing up in Japan and in the US, I can confidently say that there is something different when it comes to talk of the paranormal or strange occurrences. During my late teens to my early 20s, my friends and I had a naive obsession with exploring places in Japan known for paranormal activities, urban legends, and investigating creepy areas. This was prior to the advent of reality TV really blowing up things like ghost hunting shows. In Japan, shows like this would broadcast regularly in the summer. This was our motivation for partaking in these excursions. Here is my story. While growing up in Japan, I attended school on a US military installation. I graduated in the early 2000s. Following graduation, most of my graduating class moved back to the US to pursue college or start their adult lives. Most would leave and never return to Japan. My parents are Japanese, so I had every reason to return. It was December, and I had just returned home after my fall semester at college. To my relief, a couple of my friends chose to remain in Japan after high school, so I had friends to hang out while home on vacation. One evening, I'm out joyriding with my buddies. We had nowhere important to be and just driving around aimlessly. Occasionally, we would stop by popular hangout spots for young adults hoping to meet some cute Japanese girls to flirt with, as how else would a couple of young 19-year-old dudes would want to spend an evening? My friend, which I will call Jay, had a 90s Nissan Silvia, aka 240SX outside of Japan for you car folks. He was obsessed with drifting. Truth be told, he was not very good at it. You couldn't really fault the guy for trying though. That evening, he suggested that we take off to Asamizo Park, near our hometown of Sagamihara. This large public park had many parking lots peppered throughout its grounds. The lots were prime locations for him to practice whipping his car around while not causing damage or any fender benders. Without hesitation, we all agree and head in that direction. About 20 minutes later, and we are passing the main entrance to Asamizo. During the day, this is a pleasant public park that many people hang out at. Japan, in comparison to other countries, is a relatively safe country. This park was no exception to that notion. However, it did have some unfortunate events that happened here. I will elaborate upon this later. After driving into the park for about 7 minutes, we reached the first parking lot. It was around 10 o'clock at night. We pulled in and parked. I hopped out of the car and pulled out a fresh pack of cigarettes and lit one up. The evening was brisk. I gazed around, letting my night vision collaborate as the lights far off in the distance twinkled. My other friend with us, Richard, also lit a cigarette, and we proceeded to have a conversation about whether Jay would be able to even get his car sideways. Jay pulls out and begins to whip his car around the parking lot. As Jay's car spun counterclockwise, the wailing of his tires attempting to grip the asphalt broke silence in the evening. Even now, I can close my eyes and still remember the smell of burning rubber. Adjacent to the parking lot was a tree line that led into some thick brush and wooded area. The park was known for its green belts scattered throughout it. I remember looking over my shoulder a few times that evening because I had this feeling that we were being watched from the woods. But each time I scanned the tree line, I saw nothing out of the ordinary. What happened next would cause me to jump so hard that I laugh even now when I think about it. The cell phone in my right pocket starts ringing and vibrating, and I jumped with a fright. The fact that light paranoia had set in from watching the tree lines did not help with the anxiety experienced from the unexpected phone call. As I was attending college in the States and only back on vacation, I no longer had a cell phone in Japan. In fact, my younger sister had lent her phone to me so that I could be reached if necessary. I pulled the phone out, thinking that she or my mother was calling for something, as none of my friends even had this number. I looked down at the green backlit LCD screen and saw displayed in Japanese was a restricted number. I thought it was strange, but figured maybe my sister was calling me from a public phone. I answered the phone and said, "Moshi Moshi?" and there was nothing but silence for a response. That was funny. I'm not doing that again. I remembered hearing a bit of static, and finally I heard the voice of a Japanese girl. My immediate thoughts were this must be a friend of my sister, and so I explained that I'm her brother and borrowing her phone for the evening. If she needed to get a hold of my sister, she should ring the house. She apologized and I reassured her that no harm had been done and then promptly ended the phone call. I placed the cell phone back in my pocket and focused back to the ruckus of noise coming from Jay's car. It must have not been 10 minutes later. The cell phone in my pocket began ringing again. This time, I was sure that it had to be my sister or my mother. Earlier that day, I left home and did not say where I was going or when I planned to return home. It wasn't uncommon for my mother or sister to call and ask if I had eaten dinner or if she should leave out food for me when I returned. I pulled the phone out and once again, I have a phone call and it was from a restricted number. I answered the phone and this time, the voice of the same Japanese girl was on the other side of the phone. Before I could ask why she was calling for my sister, she cut me off. Now, based off the previous phone call, I thought there were a couple of things that were kind of strange. I know most of my sister's friends and recognized their voice over the phone. This girl, on the other hand, I did not. Additionally, my sister never mentioned anything about new friends and her circle was tight. She wasn't very big on being a social butterfly, but perhaps I was wrong. My sister is 3 years junior to me, and so my assumption was this girl had to be around my sister's age and too young for me. I had little interest in engaging in conversation with her. She probed me with questions, and I kept my answers vague. I don't even know why I continued to entertain a conversation with her, but hanging out would just be very rude. Suddenly, she asked what I was doing in a park so late in the evening. I almost began to answer when it dawned on me. I did not mention anything about where I was at or what I was doing. I told her that I never said I was at a park. She lightly giggled and tried to play it off, insisting that she thought I said I was at a park. I told her that this was weird and I had to go, and I hung up. Jay grew tired of drifting in this parking lot. He pulled up on us and from the driver's side suggested that we change up the scenery. Richard and I hopped back in the vehicle and off we went. Now, at another parking lot, we hop out and Jay continues to do his own thing. This parking lot had soccer fields not too far away from it, and the lamps in the parking lot painted an orange hue, which was a bit comforting. Oddly enough, the feeling of being watched returned to me. I swung around to my right and stared at the empty field on the other side of the parking lot fence. There was nothing. At this point, Jay parks his car and shuts it off. Now, silence and a thin film of burnt rubber veiled the parking lot. Richard starts asking what was up with the phone calls. I began to explain to Jay and Richard about what transpired. They both agreed that it was a little strange, but speculated that maybe my sister mentioned it to her friends that her older brother was back in town. Jay proceeds to tease me that I should start talking to the chick, but I protest because I have no interest. Suddenly, my phone rings again. Same deal, restricted phone number and the same girl. This time, she sounds a bit more aggressive. "How come you left? What was wrong with the last spot?" I asked what she meant. She then says, "You left the last parking lot you were just at." I remember the hair standing on the back of my neck. I made it a point to be vague and never mentioned what I was doing or where I was at, yet somehow, this girl knew what I was doing and knew that we had left the first parking lot. Something didn't feel right, so I hung up on her. A moment later, my phone is blowing up. I answer again, this time irritated. "What do you want?" There's a silence, and then I hear light static. In a sort of hushed manner, I hear her voice. "I'm at the field. I see you." I spin around and face the field, looking for any signs of a person. I remember my heart racing fast as I fumbled to figure out what exactly was going on. "What do you mean you see me at the field?" I asked. She tells me that she sees me standing with my friends, wearing my gray jacket in my buddy's car. She tells me that she's coming over to us and wants to hang out. The line goes dead. I look at both Jay and Richard and give the rundown on what she said. They both had weird looks on their faces, and I know them well enough to know when they're lying or pulling my leg. They both just look clueless. The phone rings again. "Hey, I'm almost there. Will you wait for me?" the girl asks. "Huh? No? What's going on here? Why do you keep asking me questions? How do you know where I'm at? Just who are you anyways? I know all my sister's friends and I don't recognize your voice," I exclaimed. "I never said I knew your sister," she replied in another hushed manner. At this point, I was extremely confused. I looked back at the field and I don't see anything. As I'm still on the phone with her, I asked her where she was at. She said that she would be there shortly. I'm sure my friends sensed the panic in my voice. Jay goes on about how nobody knows that we're out here. How does this chick even know our location? Mind you, this is the early 2000s and social media, Internet 2.0 and smartphones were not even a thing yet. People just can't get your location like that. On top of that, we were a few kilometers out of the way. You just don't randomly run into people like that. The evening is getting later, as it is past 11 p.m. and I have no explanation as to what is going on. My phone rings again, and before I can even say hello, she asks if I could see her. I am spinning and jerking like a laundry machine agitator at this point. Both of my friends decided that this was too weird. Richard yanks the phone from my hand and proceeds to speak with her as well. Richard, feeling like this is a joke, decided to toy with her a bit. He starts to ask her what she is wearing. She begins explaining something to him from what I can hear from how he responds. He then asks her what color her undergarments were, but then she abruptly hangs up. Richard tells me that he thinks he annoyed her enough that she may not bother calling again. We all nervously chuckle as we cannot even begin to understand what all just transpired. My phone blows up again. Same deal, restricted call. I answered again, this time upset, but I'm cut off. Her voice is much louder now. I could hear what sounded like wind in the background. She begins saying that she is quickly approaching us, yelling not to leave her. She wants to be with all of us. All of a sudden, I hear Jay drop a soda can as he faced the field. "What the heck is that?" I remember Jay saying in disbelief. I hang up the phone. I look at both of my friends and Jay motions to jump into the car. We all jump in and he stomps on the gas as we make our escape. My phone rings again. I look, and although I don't want to answer, I feel as though I need to. I take the call and I can hear her voice. It sounds slightly huskier. She casually said, "It's a shame that you all left before I could reach you." Jay is driving frantically away from the park. At the time, I had no idea where he was taking us. It was just quiet in the car as I had the phone held up to my ear. "Oh well, I guess I will just need to follow you and find you all at the family mart that you're going to stop at," she said as she gave a creepy laugh. I then replied, "What the hell do you mean by the family mart that we're going to?" Before I realized it, Jay had cut the wheel hard and pulled to the side of the road and threw his four-way hazard lights and brought the car to a sudden stop. Richard damn near hit the dashboard, sitting in shotgun seat. Jay turned and looked at me. I can still remember the white look on his face. He then quietly asked, "How did she know I was taking us to Family Mart?" Family Mart is a Japanese convenience store chain found throughout Japan. I hung up the phone and then pouted off. We sat in silence for a moment there. This felt like a weird dream or something. I told Jade that let's just go somewhere else. Shortly after, we drove to a 24-hour restaurant that was our hangout spot where many of our Japanese friends frequented. We just wanted somewhere brightly lit and somewhat crowded to chill out. As we walked up to the entrance, I could see some friends occupying a booth. We walked in and proceeded to join the party. After we ordered some coffee, we started explaining on strange occurrences. Initially, everyone listened on with excitement, but as I explained the story, the look of excitement written on everyone's faces eventually faded and it got awkwardly quiet. Another female friend of mine who sat across from me looked at me and asked again whereabouts in the park we were at. As she asked this, I could see her make eye contact with her boyfriend. He pulled out a cigarette and lit it up just as he went into his explanation. He then began to explain, "You guys, you all do know what happened at Asamiso Park, right?" We all exchanged a blank glance. There was an incident that happened in that park one evening where a girl was walking through the park in the evening. Someone approached her and dragged her into the green belt where she was assaulted and strangled. I heard some rumors about some bad juju associated with that area. In disbelief, I scoffed. "You're joking, right?" Without any hesitation, he looked at me and said, "Nope, but we need to go to a shrine. Her spirit may have latched onto you." The story which I'm about to tell you was narrated to me by my friend Tsukasa-san. Now, this creepy experience happened to him around 10 years ago. He swore that it was something that he experienced personally, and so I don't doubt him. As my friend narrates, he was in the car that ominous day. He had been to his friend's house and was now driving back to his own house. The timing must have been somewhere around 4 in the afternoon. After a few hours of driving, he felt something was off. He could hear the sounds of water droplets hitting his car's body. But it wasn't the sound of rain that startled him. Rather, he was vexed because of the weather outside. It was clear as day. Where were these rain droplets coming from? Tsukasa, as he recalls, said that he was still driving at this point. He was trying to come up to terms with this perplexing phenomenon when suddenly his car hit something. A huge thud resounded inside the car. He felt a chill run over his body, an eerie chill. Whatever it was that had hit the car was not visible to him. However, he felt the presence of something sinister on his car's hood. He described the presence as something that was out of this world, something supernatural. His hands were trembling as he continued driving towards his destination. Tsukasa sped up his car in hopes that the entity would fall off due to the higher speed of the car. While speeding, he was shouting at the top of his voice, "Go away from me!" His trembling mouth belched out the words. The rain could still be heard. Hey, that rhymed. Tsukasa was going at an insane speed. The traffic light in front of him turned red. Since the transition of the light was so sudden, he had to brake hard. As soon as he braked his car, there was a sound of something falling over to the ground. With that sound, the presence of the entity was no more. Also, Tsukasa could no longer hear the raindrops. Paralyzed by fear, he somehow reached his house. By now, he wanted to know the explanation of what he experienced, so he called his psychic friend and narrated the whole incident. The psychic friend revealed to him that 1 year ago, there was an accident at the spot where Tsukasa felt the entity on his hood on the car. On that day, it was raining heavily. An old woman was crossing the street when a car came and hit her with full force. Since the woman had a small body, her body got stuck on the hood of the car. Her body was stuck in that position until the car made a stop at the red light, and with the stoppage of the car, her body tumbled to the ground. She was dead. Tsukasa was overcome with grief after hearing this. When I heard this story from my friend, I was ambivalent. I didn't know whether to be scared or to feel sorry for the old woman. What makes some souls enter nirvana? What turns some souls into vengeful spirits? I had no answer. My friend had recently joined a company. The company was somewhat distant from her house, and therefore she used the train to commute to her work daily. The train station was about a 10-minute walking distance from her house, and it had a railroad crossing in between. That day, her company had a drinking party. She returned home from work and headed to the party place after changing her clothes. My friend had a lot of fun drinking with her coworkers. When the party was over, she headed to the karaoke bar with some of her close friends. In the midst of all the fun, she completely lost track of time, and it was already the time for the last train. Not wanting to miss the train, she took her leave and hurried towards the train station. Fortunately, she was able to reach there just in time and board the train. The thick darkness outside the train was a sign that it was already past midnight. She got down at the station near her home. As she was walking on the platform, she got struck with this really deep, uneasy feeling. At the very end of the platform, she saw a white figure. However, she was so drunk that she blamed it on that and headed to her house. While walking on the pathway to her house, she got a feeling of being followed by something. She thought that it might have been the white figure from before. Hastily, she reached the railroad crossing. The alarm was beeping, a sign of oncoming train. Not wanting to get stuck with the white figure from before, she hurriedly made her way past the railroad crossing before the gate could close. She looked back. The white figure was standing behind the closed gate of the crossing. When she realized the abomination that was following her for so long, she got goosebumps on her whole body. The figure looked like a woman in white clothes. The face, however, was totally covered by her black hair. Although it seemed like the figure was standing, it was totally in an unnatural way. Her whole lower body portion was completely transparent. The oncoming train blocked the view for a few moments. When the train was gone, so was the white figure. My friend ran towards her house. It's been a long time since that incident, and my friend has not encountered that white figure again. She even searched about any accidents that might have happened there, but she couldn't find any. Whatever it was will remain a mystery, that's for sure. This incident dates back to the time when I was still studying in middle school. During those days, my friend circle consisted of two people, who I will call A-kun and B-kun in this story. I was friends with A-kun and B-kun since the time when we were in elementary school. Moreover, our homes were very close to each other's, and this allowed us to meet every day after school. Near to our houses was a hill that we would visit frequently. In other words, it was our meeting ground where we could hold our frivolous conversations late until night. The best thing about this was that we had permissions from my parents to stay on the hill till midnight, and it was not a problem for us. It was like any other night when I was chattering with my friend A-kun on top of the hill. Our other friend B-kun had not come yet. Even after a few hours, he was nowhere in sight. So I said to my friend, "Hey, B-kun is not here yet. Shall we go to his house and see what's the matter?" And so the two of us descended down the hill and walked in the direction of B-kun's house. There was a playground of sorts that we needed to cross before reaching his house. So as we were crossing the playground, I caught something in my peripheral vision. On the swing, a little girl was wearing all white, swinging back and forth. It was almost midnight, and I was sure terrified by the presence of that girl. I turned to my friend and spoke, Did you just see that?" My friend turned towards the swing to see why I was so scared. Once he saw what I was looking at, he let out a loud scream, and the two of us both immediately turned back and ran towards the hill. When we arrived on the hill, we sat down to control the shivering of our bodies. We tried to rack our brains to give a logical justification to what we saw in the playground. A few minutes had passed by when we suddenly saw B-kun approaching us from the dark. "Hey, B-kun, didn't you just come from the direction of the playground? Did you see the little girl on the swing?" "No, I didn't see anything like that." This is when I turned to A-kun and asked them if they also saw it too. To remove all of our doubts, all three of us went back to that park. There on the swing, we saw her. The girl was still there. Immediately, we all ran back to the hill. "See, we were right. Did you see her this time?" "Yes, I believe you. I saw her smiling." I didn't look at her face. It was too darn terrifying. Same thing goes for me. I didn't have the courage to look at her face either. The very next day, B-kun lost his life when he was ran over by a truck. Could it be a possibility that the girl was a Shinigami and her smile was more of a gateway to death? In our group, only B-kun saw her smile and thus was taken to the afterlife by her. First of all, to explain what an Oni is. In legends or children's stories, Oni is an imaginary human-like monster. It is said to have horns on its head, and it wears a loincloth made of tiger skin. It is said to be monstrous and wild in nature. Oni are often imagined as monstrous creatures, but they can also appear as spiritual beings in some religions. The true identity of Oni as a spirit is a human being, a him, her, or self. It is said that a person will become an evil spirit due to hatred and jealousy, and will transform into a form of a demon, the Oni. In famous Japanese plays, the Oni often starts as a beautiful woman and slowly transforms into a horned monstrous being because of her anger and jealousy against her lover. Since they can be spirits, Oni are regarded as a form of fear that brings disasters to people in the same way as demons in Western cultures. This story does not really involve a person changing into a demon, but rather watching a person being cursed by the Oni. My friend's family were believed to be cursed and were not able to go to Kyoto freely due to the political problems dating back centuries ago. This story starts a few days ago when I was in the kitchen. "Ryujin," my friend called to me. "Yeah, you want some snacks again?" I called back. I was in the kitchen cooking some pasta sauce to keep and some for us to use. Also, it was that time of the month for my friend, so she needed random snacks and munching, but not too much since her stomach is weak. She ran into the kitchen carrying our cat and said, "My cousin just sent me a message through Line, saying that his family members are in trouble." Our cat was making a funny face and it made me smile a little bit. "I'm not joking, please be in the mood to think it was something paranormal." She fussed and pulled me over to see her phone. "Alright, so, someone got scratched and what happened?" I was looking at the picture she was showing me. "That's my cousin, he was scratched mysteriously. You know, he doesn't have any pets, right? And he lives alone, and there's no way that he could do that by himself." She pointed out many strange pieces of evidence to make me think that it was something paranormal related. That always happens, and I will always try to debunk her evidences. Anyways, I told her every scientific possibility. Sleep disorder, imaginative victimization, almost everything that I could think of. She insisted that those were not the real reasons and would blame it on something much more complicated. "Alright, what about demonic possession?" I answered, losing my words. "Hey, you know what? That might be kind of close. You know, our family is cursed," she told me, toning down a little. Okay, this always happens during our normal conversations. She will pick up something about her family's curse and blame all kinds of possible facts, blah 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 blah. Whatever it is, I got it. About a week goes by and my friend sent me a message saying that her cousin's wound became worse. I really couldn't do much at this point, so I just said for them to call a doctor. After that, my friend called me and I barely remember what she said. It was about some sort of curse, so I think I became a bit cranky and just cut off her call in the middle of our conversation. The next morning, she messaged me asking why I cut her off. As I was scrolling through our conversation, I saw the picture of the wound, and it kind of reminded me of a bear. You know how bears like to leave scratch marks on trees to show their territory? That's kind of what the wound looked like. 3 perfect lines, deep at one end and lighter at the other. After that, I asked my friend if her cousin went to the wild and got attacked by some sort of animal. My friend said that at first it started as a burn mark, then it became itchy. After that, the cousin scratched it until the itch was gone, and then it swelled and became like a claw mark. To me, it seemed to be an infection, but I don't know how and why the wound will deepen itself with no reason. Perhaps it's some kind of strange bacteria. What really freaked me out is that her cousin would call her in the middle of the night, explaining how the wound is, let's just say it would bleed and it was always wet, but he would always never visit the hospital or go to the doctors. At this point, we're not really sure what to do. We're not even sure if it's paranormal. We're thinking about sending him to the hospital, but we're also not too sure. Okay, this story was kind of whack. Maybe it was the way that the author was telling it, but man, what's so scary about 3 scratch marks on their back? Like, maybe they just didn't describe how terrifying the scratch marks were. Maybe the scratch marks got a creepy face in them, and that's why it's so terrifying. But anyways, here's the next story. I was visiting Japan from Canada in July 2018. I was meditating and laying down in a hotel room. Suddenly, I felt a very strong grab and tugging on my lower leg, which quickly escalated up my thigh to my hips. I was startled out of my meditation and quickly sat up to find nobody there. It felt like a strong person mauling me. Has anyone had this experience before, or does anyone know what it could be? Interestingly, minutes later, I heard footsteps outside. It sounded like a group of people. So I got up to look outside my hotel window to see what was up, but there was nobody, and I didn't see anybody there. I was sure I could hear people talking outside, but I didn't see anybody. However, upon closer inspection, it looked like some sort of shadowy movement. I got my cell phone and took a few photos. I have a photo that looks like something is looking up at me. They appear to be wearing a beanie hat. The person looks ghastly. This is not the first time I've taken pictures of ghosts. I have photos of what appears to be a man and child in an armoire, and a smiling boy's face in my porch. My house was built in 1921. When I was a teenager, I was feeding my dog in our porch. There was a door with a window in between the porch and our kitchen. My dog was looking up through the window and he started to whine. I was on the floor putting food in the bowl. I became scared and grabbed him by the collar and quickly stood up to peer through the window of the door. My dog became very agitated, so I looked through the window, quite scared. That's when I saw a huge, large black shadow figure go around the corner of the kitchen into the living room. At that point, I knew it wasn't human, so I quickly opened the door, allowing my dog to run after it. I stayed in the porch and waited for him to return. He did return as if nothing had happened and went back to the business of having his dinner. Years later, many years later in that house that I live now, my teenage son asked me if I ever saw a shadow man. I said that I don't think so. I forgot about my past experiences and also really did not consider this as a shadow man. I always thought about it as a big shadow. At this point, my son wanted to show me something. We go to his computer and he Googled up one of those shadow men. I was in absolute shock to see what I saw years ago when I was a young teenager. It was the exact figure I had seen with my dog. I would have questioned my own eyes, and to this day, I totally believe in the spiritual world because my dog saw this figure before me. I had no idea that it had obviously been at the window and watching us, but my dog saw it. I have been working in a private food manufacturing company for 5 years now. The place looks old, with most facilities not renovated until now, and if you're new to the company's premises, you would think this is haunted due to the eerie feeling given by unfinished building parts and rusty exposed metal braces in browning white paint. It was early morning today, October 10th, 2024. I arrived on my workplace at around 5:30 a.m. as this was the most convenient time to avoid traffic and take a very long rest. I was alone, and since I'm comfortable being alone in a dark room, I did not turn on any lights at all, so that way I could go back to sleep easily. The only light in this room was the bright red light coming from the digital clock on the far corner. Around 5:45 a.m., one coworker arrived. He was still sitting, waiting for his 6 a.m. duty while I'm still in my napping position. I'm in the middle of half asleep, half awake when I heard 3 claps. I was a bit shocked and curious and lifted up my head immediately, with some thoughts running in my head. There's not a thing that it can't be somewhat to an imagination, but upon asking my sitting coworker, he looked at me with a curious stare and replied, "What do you mean? I didn't hear anything." I got some goosebumps after that because I confirmed that those 3 claps were not heard by my coworker. I went back to sleep again, and I wasn't scared. I was thinking that perhaps the child ghost in our workplace was just playing games. The last time I had an encounter with this ghost was when I saw it in the corner of my eye. It was peeking on me from the side of the cabinet while I was working. Here's a creepy Japanese story. My papa is a very kind man. He takes good care of me. He is very good at cooking. He is always complimenting me by saying things like cute and such. I love him very much. However, sometimes when he looks at me, he makes a sad face and says, "Too thin." I get sad. On the other side of the door, a lot of monsters live. I refrain from going in there. I listen to music every day and stare at the dolls my papa makes. My papa is a doll maker. He has a cold box that has a lot of dolls in it. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 dolls I lined up. Their faces a little bit bigger than mine, the hair a little longer. My dad's favorite doll is the one with long black hair and a white face. He yells, "Nakajima-san," when he takes her out of the cold box. I don't like Nakajima-san, however. My favorite doll is the one with brown hair and small eyes. I get strange feelings whenever I look at her. My papa said that I resembled that doll. Maybe that's why I like her. Papa loves Nakajima-san, so I threw her on the other side of the door, at the monsters. She was soon boiled by them. Now, Papa has no choice but to love me. After throwing Nakajima-san, I could hear creepy voices from the other side. There are really a lot of monsters on the other side. Papa won't be mad at me. I'm sure he'll say cute to me. What would I get for today's dinner? I hope it's some tasty meat. Okay, so I guess the story is the dad's a serial killer and the dad likes to make dolls out of the people that he kills and then they cannibalize them. Very interesting. So this isn't super scary, but at the same time, it sent me running. It was several years ago when I went to Japan with my brother for a holiday. We were staying at a pretty nice hostel in Osaka. One night, in the wee hours, 2 a.m., my brother wakes me up and asks me to go get a bottle of water for him at the vending machine. I have no idea why he woke me up for that and why he didn't get it himself. Kind of annoyed, I leave the room and go towards the elevator. I can see one of the room doors down the hall is open, and the room inside is completely dark, but I just ignore it. I head to the ground floor and buy a bottle of water. Back on my floor, I head back towards my room, and as I'm passing the pitch black open room, I kind of turn my head to look inside without actually slowing down. I saw nothing except complete darkness, but I heard a man say, "Aha!" like an exclamation of surprise, or like, "Aha, I found you." I sort of panicked and rushed back to the room. I had my key in my hand already, and I shoved it in the keyhole and got in as fast as I could. It sounds lame, but I can't make sense why a door would be open like that in the middle of the night and why some guy would be hanging out inside in the complete darkness, again with the door open. If it was just another guest, why would they leave their door open in the middle of the night? And if a staff member was tidying inside or something, they would have the lights on. It just doesn't make sense. I have a history of fainting. Like, whenever it's hot or crowded, I'd faint. Imagine it. Simple. There was once when I fainted. I think the first few times, my family called for the ambulance, and while waiting, I was in and out of consciousness. That's when I saw her. The lady in a purple kimono. She was walking past from my mom's bedroom to mine. I asked my family, "Who's that in purple?" They say, "There's no one in purple." So we leave it at that. I was sent to a hospital to be checked, and they said that everything was well. Another encounter, about a few years later, I fainted again, this time at an amusement park. It was a hot day and I collapsed. We were in line, so I was picked up and sat down on a wheelchair. While everybody was busy and panicking, I saw her again. This time, she was facing me, still in her purple kimono, but this time with an umbrella, just smiling and looking at me. She was so beautiful, I couldn't describe how she looked. I don't feel any negative energy or anything bad when I see her. I just want to know what it means and why she was always there whenever I faint. Is it my subconscious? A guardian angel? I know it's not scary or anything, but I just wanted to know if it's associated to fainting or something similar. This is a short true story. So, I was in the forest. I'm talking really deep into the forest. Just me and my teenage friend. Hard to find, easy to get lost. I came across this strange hangout in the woods near the trees. It turns out this place had been turned into what looked like a ritual circle. There were cigarette butts all over the floor, a ton of empty soda cans too, and trash. There was a nail forcefully placed into the big tree in the middle center with what me and my friend suggested was or looked like real blood. He touched it and said, "Yep, that's not tree sap, that's blood." To me, it looked real, so we got freaked out by this. It looked fresh, like it was done recently. We saw bandages and ropes hanging all around the tree, going from that tree to the next one. They were all crisscrossed as a X shape to symbolize something. In a loose row, the ropes dangled from tree to tree. On the opposite side, a similar hiding area of a smaller circle replica is what I could see, but there were birds' nests at the top. It was much cleaner. I know that Japanese forests like to use ribbons to help people navigate themselves out, but it was getting kind of scary to me. My friend then said, "This place gives me the creeps. We should go home." So I agreed and the two of us both left.